Hi everyone, good afternoon, good morning to our West Coast friends. I'm Jackie Schaefer, Vice President and General Manager of Cella, and I'm here with my colleague Connor Smith, President of the Boss Group. Connor and I are back once again to provide you an overview of what's new and what's newsworthy in the 2017 in-house creative industry report. Typically, we take about 30 minutes to walk you through a report overview, tell you what's new this year, and share the data points that gave us pause. Sometimes good pause, sometimes not. Other times the results are just interesting and noteworthy, and we'll follow that structure again this year. Following our presentation, we'll once again take questions. Please, you'll be able to use the questions pane right there in your GoToWebinar control panel. So it's kind of hard to believe, but this is the 7th time we've published this report. Lucky number 7. Once again, we've grown the survey, though we've also retired questions. That said, it's still a beast, and we really want to thank each and every one of you who answered the survey this year. We know hundreds of creative leaders took it again, and we know it takes a long time, so thank you, thank you, thank you. There's one really important change this year, specifically to the cover, that I want to draw your attention to. We've removed the word services from the title, so it used to be the in-house creative services industry report. But that word services is a word that many of you would prefer that we leave behind. And we're on board with that. In fact, I can go either way. We're not promoting one way or the other, but we do like the idea that whether you call yourself an in-house agency, the creative department, creative services, or anything else, that this title now is reflecting and inclusive of all of you. It always was, but now the title is also doing that.
Wow, 7 years on the report.
7.
I was just thinking, I was in my 30s when this started. I won't say if it was late 30s, mid 30s, early 30s, whatever, but wow, 7 years. So once again, here in year number 7, the results are based on a really strong sample size that cuts across industries, team sizes, funding models, and revenue bands. This allows us to collectively understand where industry standards lie, as well as when or if such industry, team size, funding model, and revenue bands matter. The Boss Group and Cella are narrowly focused on serving the needs of in-house creative leaders and their teams. Therefore, step 1 in our survey is to ensure respondents indicate they are from the in-house community. Very, very important. We then ask the respondents to select the title that best describes their title. This can be difficult as titles and roles and responsibilities vary greatly by organization, but we believe the most qualified information comes from those with in-depth insight into the plans, budget, staffing, and technology of the group, those who are in leadership roles. Finally, during the survey analysis stage, we painstakingly sort through response data to eliminate any responses we may feel are duplicate from the same organization. By the end of business today, you will receive a follow-up email with instructions on how to download the 2017 report. As a reminder, you're getting this access to this download almost a full week before the general public. And although we're pretty sure you're going to read all 60 pages of the report cover to cover as soon as you get it, rest assured we made the PDF very, very easy to navigate if you did indeed want to hop around. Bookmarks have been created to help you jump between the major sections quickly, and the table of contents is hyperlinked as well. There are a few design cues that I want to point out to help you in reading this report. First, as you can see on this page, there are some graphs with green data slices and others with all blue. When you see the green data slices, this indicates we are drawing your attention to these responses. And many times there's a related call out that provides further information. And as we've always done, we've listed Cella blog posts that are related to the topic or topics on the page where available. Something new we've done this year is distinguish between blog posts that have appeared in our report in the past and some new entries. As you can see here, resources with green links are new to the report, whereas the blue links have appeared before and are still relevant to the content. This year we've included 4 articles authored by working creative leaders that I want to take a few moments to highlight, as the content is, again, outstanding. By the way, they're easy to find. They are all on the full bleed pages and positioned next to the section divider pages. We got some really great articles again, starting with our colleague Andy Brendis, draws on his experience as InSource's president and speaking to how the in-house creative industry is growing, but not just in the number of teams or size of the teams, but in responsibility and value they add to the brands. Great article by Andy. Next, we have an article I'm really fond of and it's written by Jen Mans at Merck. Jen is an account lead and is responsible for generating new business for Merck Creative Studios. More accurately, Jen is tasked with helping Merck colleagues identify ways to avoid agency costs by using the in-house agency. Merck is a huge organization, and finding the right people to have these conversations with can be a real struggle. In this article, Jen writes how her perseverance, and specifically being present, helped Merck Creative Studios be named lead creative agency for a group of brands. The next article is written by a good friend of both the Boss Group and Cella, Bob Calvano. Bob is the Vice President of Design at A&E Networks and is responsible for the digital media team, a team that, according to Bob, has changed almost everything about themselves in the past few years. They've moved from waterfall to agile methodology, from brand-aligned teams to product-aligned teams, from producing static comps to producing prototypes, and all along the way, his digital specialists have evolved into blended product designer roles. Wow, I'm exhausted just reading that, Bob. Bob and his team didn't go through this alone, and Bob shares how they were able to undergo this evolution. Great, great stuff. The final article comes from Cella Consulting client, Chi Wei Potter, who goes by Chewy of Hobby Lobby. Chewy hired Cella to support a process re-engineering product. From the way our Cella colleagues, Dan and Cindy, spoke about it, it was quite the undertaking. Once implemented, Chewy's team saw improvements in the two major areas you probably would expect: efficiency and accountability. But almost as important, they saw improvements in team morale, their creative outputs, and within their relationships with internal clients. In this article, Chewy shares it wasn't easy and how it changed the way her team does business.
So now we're going to get into the questions that were new this year. First time we're ever asking these questions. Our first new question is an extension of an existing question. So that question is, what division does the creative department report into? This new question asks specifically what C-level executive the head of creative eventually reports into. What we learned is that the answers we got in both questions really mimic each other, which we probably would expect, but it was something we were looking to validate. One interesting thing did stand out, though, and that is that there's a lot of folks who indicated they report directly to the chief executive officer. I think this probably is not true. It makes me question the way we wrote the question, and we might have to word it different if we continue with it, because that would be highly unusual for a creative team to report directly to the CEO. Typically, there's at least a different C-level person we would report into first, such as the most popular answer, chief marketing officer. The next new question that we're bringing up is, what best describes your in-house agency model? So here we were looking to understand the makeup of in-house agencies. How many groups are fully employee-based versus hybrid models that include Freelancers or have started to include outsourced partners? You can see here the majority of teams are comprised of full-time staff and or with Freelancers. The other category included a few varieties of different types of responses, including outsourced on-site teams, such as Cella's managed in-house agencies. This next question is really interesting. It was a bit complex to analyze. So what we asked was, what percentage of your team's hours are spent on digital projects versus print projects? So not projects, but really the hours, so the amount of effort being spent on digital versus print. And when we looked through all the responses and averaged them out, it's not quite 50-50, there's a little bit of a spread there, but wow, it's getting close there that half of our time, 4/10 of our time we're working on digital projects versus print. So it's a mainstay. The most poignant takeaway for me was the call out you see there, that 80% of all the teams that responded work, at least 30% of their hours are spent on digital projects. So 8 out of 10 creative teams have at least 30% of their hours spent on digital.
Scheduling flexibility is a really hot topic nowadays and has been for a few years, and I'm sure we've all read an article or two on how important this is to the millennial workforce. We're happy to report that almost 70% of respondents have some sort of flex time policy in place, all the way up to absolute complete autonomy. That's huge. On the flip side, a concern is that almost 25% of respondents said flex time is not allowed at all. And just something we want to be considering for those in that 25% bucket, this can be a huge talent recruiting and retention disadvantage. Similar scheduling flexibility, again, it's really encouraging to see that almost 80% of respondents have location flexibility. And again, those who aren't flexible when it comes to working at different locations, and perhaps your business is just demanding it, but you just want to keep in mind that that could really be a disadvantage when it comes to recruiting and retention, I should say. This is a really cool slide. Here's where we get to kind of take back the curtain and see what's going on with your peers. I find this really fascinating. 44% of respondents have worked at their company for 10 or more years. And almost 70% of respondents have been with their company for 6+ years. That's really incredible. This shows tremendous leadership stability in the respondent base. And what kind of makes this encouraging for me, Jackie, is these are people who really know the organization. So when responding to these surveys, they have really in-depth knowledge of the data that they're reporting on, or certain questions that they're answering. Again, here's another fascinating slide. So who out there is thinking about leaving their role? That's a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer it if your boss is sitting next to you. 65% of you planning on being with your current employer for at least 3 more years, with 34% of you in it for the long haul of 6 years or longer. So congratulations if you're in that bucket, you're happy, you're not really looking outside. However, 25% of you are thinking that you're going to be looking for a new job in the next year or two, and 10% are already doing so. So that's over a third of you are either actively looking or thinking about very soon. And we know at this level, at a senior level, it can take anywhere between 6 and 18 months to find that right role. So you may already be kind of getting those wheels turning. So real fascinating. While the majority of you grew up in the in-house creative services group, we're starting to see more and more of an influx of leadership talent come from other groups. 25% of respondents came from a group that I'd say is unrelated, so from an unrelated department. The philosophy that a strong leader and manager can manage any function is truly spilling into the in-house creative group, and both Jackie and I are meeting more and more leaders of in-house groups who have no creative background whatsoever. Really, really interesting.
So that's the end of our new questions for this year. Now we're going to get into the things that were interesting to Connor and myself and our lead survey analyst, Cindy Ponce, like what stuck out to us. This first one is around how many direct reports does the senior most creative leader have? So the head of creative services. It's pretty spread around, right? There's no majority answer here. It's even. You can also see that we editorialized a bit here on the screen. 7 or more direct reports, it's too many. And I'm not telling you something you don't already know. You're probably shaking your head saying, I know, what can I do about it? What can you do about it? It's a great question. I'll give you a couple of tips about that in a minute. But first, what I want to share is you acknowledge you have too many direct reports and you're better with the people who are below you. Those frontline managers are having less direct reports than the head of creative services. So how many direct reports should you have? There's not a boilerplate answer, of course, right? There rarely is. But there's 2 or 3 or 4 things that I would consider when thinking about the number of direct reports someone has. The first one is, how diverse are the folks reporting into them? So, for example, the functions that report into them. If I'm a person who has 7 or 6 direct reports and they all do the same thing, adding 2 more or taking 2 away doesn't really change my world a ton because I'm managing 6 copywriters, give or take. Now, what if I'm a manager who has a copywriter, a project manager, 2 designers, a UX person, maybe an editor? Those are lots of very different fires that you're fighting. You're not consistently giving the same advice. You're rethinking it. It takes more time. So the more diverse the people are underneath you in what they do, the less you should have. Another related factor here is the number of responsibilities you have that are operational or strategic in nature. And don't think of the ones that are just specific to what you do or within the creative group, but also what you have to do for the marketing department or whatnot. The last one is how much time are you expected to impact the deliverables or output of your creative team? So are you also the creative director? Are you playing the role as an account manager? How much of that type of time? So how diverse are the people under you and what they do? How much time are you impacting the creative, being a working manager, if you will? And what are your strategic and operational responsibilities? Hey, here comes a real big shocker, folks. If you have 7 or more direct reports, you surely hit, you don't have in the 64% of not having enough time to develop the people below you. And even if you don't have 7 or more, most of you don't have enough time. Only 28% of folks have enough time to adequately provide team coaching and developing. And we know that not developing a direct report hurts the individual, it hurts the team, and it hurts you and your ability to move forward. So while it's easy to deprioritize these activities, they're really critical to your team's success and the continued evolution. You've got to try and find the time for this, maybe by having less direct reports. Maybe by having an operations manager. So don't get caught up in the word manager. It could be specialist, it could be director, it doesn't matter what it is. You have an operational person whose role is focused on technology, vendor management, finance management, processes, etc. Someone whose job it is to make sure things like people, getting talent, whether it's freelancers or full-time employees, getting them in seat, making sure they're in their right roles. People, process, what are the processes, what's the technology to support their team? Someone's thinking about that, and it's the main piece of their job. If they're doing that, and maybe that's your job and someone else is doing the creative impact, it doesn't matter, but someone should be doing this in your organization as a major part of their job. And half the team say, yes, we have someone who's focused on this. That's really exciting because that wasn't that big last year. The other really exciting piece about this is if you have 30 or more people on your team, 8 out of 10 of you have an operations lead. If you're in that 17% who does not have an operations lead, this is something that you should take as a key takeaway today. That does your department need it? The answer is yes. How does it work in your department?
And Jackie, I would imagine this is one of the roles that you can get from non-related departments, so to speak. I wouldn't say easily, but... Right,
it's not easily. However, there are very easily transferable skills that someone can come in and do this. You just need to provide them context around how the creative world is different. Changing gears a little bit here, the number of teams at Chargeback still remains to be about 1/3 of all teams, so it's not the most common funding model. Still an allocation, or more commonly a cost center are the more popular ways to do it, but 33% of teams are charging back. And there was a big change this year in the way in which they charge back. So the blended hourly rate, and that's charging just one rate, regardless of what type of work you're doing. So if you are doing print design work, it is $90 an hour. If you are editing, it is $90 an hour. Project managing, it is $90 an hour, versus separating these out. So that blended rate, it's become more popular. We saw a 15 percentage point increase come from actually all 3 other categories and move toward that blended hourly rate. Related here, the most common chargeback rate is still within $81 to $100 an hour. But listen, don't take that without a grain of salt, because as you can see here on the left side, almost half of all in-house groups charge less than $80 an hour. And these groups, they're probably subsidized, or maybe they have offshore operations helping them decrease their costs, because under $80 an hour is low. And then another 22% charge more than $100 an hour. And my guess is that those teams are one, if not two, of these next things. One is they work at a Fortune 100 or 200 company where there's kind of a higher cost base for things like compensation and benefits, and or the company is located in a major metropolitan area, San Francisco, Chicago, DC, New York, etc., where the cost of living is higher, which is driving up their chargeback rate. Related to that subsidy, right? So if you're not subsidized, it means you have to recover all of your costs, down through overhead. Most groups don't have to do all of their costs down through overhead. It's, as you can see in the blue bars, it's different types of things. Maybe only their salaries, maybe their salaries plus all their benefits, etc. But almost half of you are in this box that we have on the screen, that there's no specific recovery goal, or you're trying to recover a flat number provided by finance that you don't know why it is. You're just told, I've got to recover $3 million. This is not a good place to be, because it means you don't know necessarily what's important to your finance department or why it's important, and then you're not enabled to be able to think about how to impact it. So another key takeaway today, a piece of homework if you will, is if you fall in that boxed area, please make it your priority this year to figure this out. Number of projects.
Your favorite question.
I know, because you love it. We've included it this year. But those of you who know me know I don't love it. It's just two apples to oranges for me, but there is some merit when we start cutting the data like this. And you can see that small teams tend to be, 2,000 or less projects. Mid-size go up a little bit. Large kind of stick there where the mid-size are and getting between 1,000 and 3,000 projects get done. But then you look across to the mega teams, and it is all over the board here. I imagine the folks in this first box, they work on a lot of digital, video, tier 1 projects that take a lot of time. They're talking, 100 hours is their average project length, something like this. Whereas folks down here in this lower box, 17% of mega teams, those are the teams that are 51 or more people doing 8,000 projects or more a year. Those folks, I'm sure they still have digital, video, and tier 1. However, I would imagine they have a good amount of churn and burn tier 3 projects as well. So training money. Do you have an established training budget this year? So it's mostly good news on this front. And while your budgets may not be known to you, 70% of your teams are able to take training. I think that's fantastic. But how much money you have to work with is another question. Do you have enough money to send folks to something like Adobe Max or Beyond the Creative, or how? Some of you do, some of you don't. We've cut this data, and we do it every year because it's so interesting to us that the numbers are just so crazy. You might have an average of $200 a person or more than $1,000 a person. And when we cut it by revenue band, we cut it by team size to see if there's some rhyme or reason, and there's just not. Now, there's one little place, is the asterisk, that we saw an interesting change in the response, and that's if we looked at just not-for-profits, higher ed, and government organizations. And while their answers or responses were still across the board here, there was a far greater concentration of responses in the lower end of the financial band than in the higher band.
So meaning that those organizations have even less money?
They do.
Which is not surprising, but you would think that would be one of the attractions to joining a group like that.
You would, and of course there's surely other benefits, but probably not explicit dollars for external training.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to team size growth, this is some great news here. More than 1/3 of teams expect to grow this year, so that's really, really encouraging. As Andy wrote about earlier, the value proposition of in-house creative clearly is catching on. Another 50% of teams expect to stay the same size this year. And a data point outside of this slide that's very interesting is that 63% of teams experience an attrition rate of 5% or less. That is really stunning. So on one hand, congratulations. Anytime you can retain great team members, that's incredible. But just something for you to chew on. On the other hand, perhaps this may be too low for teams hoping to bring in new skill sets, experience, or new design styles. Just something one need to consider. There's healthy attrition, and then there's perhaps too low of attrition because you're not getting that infusion of new talent. In terms of team size, mid-sized teams are growing, and the mega teams inched up, so we're seeing more of an influx into larger team growth, which I would say overall is a positive, that teams are growing, and again, I guess that's due to the work that's coming into the teams, obviously. And Jackie and I spoke about this slide for a while, this data point, hours per week. So we're seeing a decrease in overtime being worked as almost 80% of your teams are working less than 45 hours a week, with 27% of your teams working less than 40. So a few thoughts on this, and I know Jackie has some thoughts too. One, this could be due to more steady and strategic freelance usage. That could be a positive. Or it could be due to more off-site work being done and not being able to necessarily accurately track whether someone is indeed working 45 versus 38 hours. If it is indeed due to more freelance usage and your team's not having to work significant overtime, that leads to burnout. That's a huge congratulations and kudos if that's the reason this is going down.
However, my concern is, and I think it's a concern that Connor and I both share, and we think about it as we reflect on our own organizations, is are we starting to normalize what 40 hours is? And we really think that, 41 to 45 is the new 40, and that's how folks are responding. And I say this because, Connor mentioned remote. You can't see when they start and stop, so you have an assumption there's 40. Flexible schedules, you're not necessarily there when someone starts or finishes their day, so again, you might not know. And we all know it's pretty easy to creep up towards 45 if you arrive a few minutes early, you stay a few minutes late, you take a shorter lunch, or you eat your lunch while you're watching this webinar. Mm-hmm. So you get to 45 hours pretty quick, and our point here is 45 for me is manageable, but for other people it may not be. And if it creeps higher, do we start to normalize numbers higher than that? Just check in with your folks. Don't assume they're working 40s. Ask them the question, because you don't want to risk burnout. You don't want to create unnecessary retention, especially within your brightest and best employees.
The trend remains very positive when it comes to flexible staff, as 86% of you are able to use freelancers when you need it. Some of you are, I wouldn't say blank check, but essentially it seems like you have the green light. If you need freelancers, you're able to get it. Well, a nice portion of you, perhaps there needs to be a significant business reason or something you need to justify. Regardless, almost 9 out of 10 of you are able to bring in freelance work if the situation dictates it. So interesting slide here, and just take a moment to digest this. The main takeaway here is that for the 4th straight year, 30%, so almost a third of you, planned on increasing your temporary hiring plans. That's really, really positive overall. So just consistent growth year over year, you're looking to increase spend in terms of temporary hiring, which again could reflect less hours being worked with your full-time staff, creative infusion, lots of benefits for that. We did see a flip-flop in 2014 in terms of decreased spending, 2014 and 15, I should say. But really the past 2 years, if you look at that data, it's remarkably close, and it's leveled out. All right, so Jackie mentioned in the kickoff that there were certain data points that gave us pause. I think this one made us stop dead in our tracks. It's a real head scratcher. This is not what the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics is reporting, and I'll refer to that in a little bit, otherwise known as the BLS, and certainly not what we're seeing here on the ground in terms of hiring at the Boss Group, one of the largest creative staffing firms in the U.S. 48% of you are stating that there's enough qualified talent to choose from. And Jackie had mentioned how digital design is growing as a piece of the pie in in-house creative. Almost half of you are saying there's enough digital talent out there. I mean, even saying that out loud for me, it just, who knows? I mean, obviously that's truth for some of your worlds, and I'm not quite sure why, but it just doesn't match some of the data that we're going to be going over in a little bit. So if you start with looking at openings versus hires, this slide really tells a story. For the first time since the BLS started tracking this data in 2002, the number of job openings has surpassed the number of hires. Well, you may take a step back and say, well, hey, Connor and Jackie, how can there be more hires than there were job openings? And it's all the way the data was collected, and when we go through this, you'll see how powerful this is. Hires is a catch-all. The way the BLS measures this, hires is a catch-all statistic for all additions made to staff. So this includes seasonal, temporary, internal transfers from one location to another, people you may have laid off that you brought back, whether it be part-time or full-time. To be counted at, well, likewise, or excuse me, conversely, to be counted as a job opening, there has to be active recruiting for workers outside the location that the role is open. So as you can see, there's so many ways that you can hire someone, correct? Again, seasonal employees, temporary employees. We just had an example at the Boss Group where one of our star employers is moving from our Baltimore location to our Philadelphia location. We didn't formally open up a role and start recruiting for that externally. That wouldn't have counted as an opening, but it counted as a hire. That happens all the time. And you'll see for the better part in our slide here since January 2007, that gap between openings and hires has been pretty big. Biggest in the Great Recession, of course. For it to intersect, where there actually are more job openings than hires when you factor in all the ways that someone could get hired, is really powerfully telling us that the talent market is scarce. Another thing to look at is the quit rate. So the quit rate is the actual number of people who have quit their jobs as a percentage of the total U.S. labor force. And you'll see prior to the Great Recession in 2007, that was about 2.2%. So, if we can kind of dust off our brains here prior to Great Recession, it was very, very good. Hiring was very strong. We all know that money was flowing probably a little too freely throughout the U.S. Economy. And then it took a huge dip, and it's really taking a long time to recover. But now we'll see we back to match pre-Great Recession levels, that people are very, very confident in leaving their role because, as the previous slide showed, that as long as you have good skills, there's going to be a job out there for you. And then this isn't all too familiar. The unemployment rate, you'll see this as one of the big data points in terms of any of the, the talking heads or the pundits on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC, whatever it is that you watch. And many times this tends to be a lagging indicator as it tends to get updated from time to time. But regardless, 4.5% unemployment is a really, really low number. And if you slice that even further, those with a bachelor's degree or higher, which tends to be the demographic that this industry hires for, we tend to hire people with degrees or higher, that's 2.5% unemployment. Guys, that is beyond full employment. That means that 97.5% people with a degree or bachelor's degree or higher have a job. That's just stunning. That's really incredible. So it's very, very challenging. And, when I say these statements, just remember, we are on the in-house industry creative report. You may turn on the news and you'll hear a lot about, and there are people in this country in terms of industries that aren't doing well. But if you look at people with degrees, professionals in this industry, 2.5% unemployment is really, really low.
So if we kind of connect a few of the things we've talked about over the past half hour on this topic, on this piece of the topic, what we hope you guys leave with is maybe you aren't personally having problems finding talent. Maybe you're not having challenges finding talent because you don't have many openings, but other people are. And what's going to happen, if it hasn't happened already, is corporate recruiters are going to be calling your employees. They're going to be looking to poach them, if you will. So you need to be focused on how do you ensure people are having a valuable employee experience in your organization, and how you can continue to retain that. How can you increase that training budget, et cetera? Work from home or remote, the flexible schedules. How do you create that? It's a very trendy term, but the employee value proposition. How do you grow it?
Absolutely. So this slide's going to go out the pasture after this year. It will not make it to the 8th year of the survey, but we thought it was an important data point to report on, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of agreement here. But Adobe Premiere is essentially owns the market in terms of video editing software. Jackie and I liken it back to the InDesign Quark battle back in the day, where Quark lost and lost big time. Well, at this point, Final Cut Pro is clearly losing to Adobe Premiere as the premier editing solution in the video space. All right, if you'll indulge us for a few moments, we'd like to tell you about some programs and events that both the Boss Group and Cella have coming up.
And then we'll get into questions right after.
You got it. All right. The Boss Group is a niche provider of human capital solutions, been around for almost 30 years, and we focus on providing top-notch talent exclusively in the creative, marketing, and digital space. So if you're looking for talent, whether it be temporary, temp to hire, or direct placement in the creative, marketing, digital space, we'll hope you'll consider the Boss Group for your recruiting and staffing needs. I'm also very proud to say that the Boss Group is the only creative staffing firm with multi-geographic presence to be recognized by Innovero in partnership with CareerBuilder to win the Best of Staffing Award for both client and talent for the past 7 years. So in industries and in a country devoid of great service, we're happy to say that ours goes above and beyond, and we're the only creative staffing firm to win this award 7 straight years in a row. Also want to talk a little bit about our Creative Connects program. Creative Connects, the next one is coming up on June 21st, which seems like far away, but it'll be here before we know it. This is a happy hour series in all of our retail locations, our brick and mortar locations, where we get creatives of all disciplines together to network, no agenda other than getting together and sharing stories and just kind of goodwill in the creative community. So please visit our website for more information on that. And finally, we have an event actually tomorrow, Creative Execs. If you're interested in Creative Execs, please visit creativeexecs.com. And the topic is very, very relevant to what we're talking about here today. It's retaining team members in a tight talent market. And again, our first one is tomorrow in New Jersey. And if you're interested, you can register at creativeexecs.com and see the dates in your location.
For those of you who might not be familiar with Cella, Cella is the leading management consultancy and workforce solutions provider. So what does that mean? One special thing about it is we only serve the in-house creative community. We don't serve external agencies. We don't serve the greater marketing organization or shared services, so that's where you're seated. We focus on the in-house creative community. We provide consulting on projects. We can help you pick technology. We can help you implement technology. We can build a metrics program for you. We can help you plan your strategic evolution so that you move on that continuum from order taker to strategic partner. And then for those groups of you who aren't able to have your own in-house creative team, we can also put one on site for you. And then something we're really proud about is our professional development programs. So we have Project Management Bootcamp next month in Chicago. And it says Project Management Bootcamp 2, but please don't be afraid of that number 2. You don't have to come to 1. Creative Manager Bootcamp, this is for folks who are newer in becoming managers or maybe just brand new to the creative world and need to learn kind of the business side of creative, how to talk about things quantitatively, and also how to develop people. It's not just about running a business, it's about the people. And then Beyond the Creative, we'll be doing Beyond the Creative 5, which is our newest program. We launched it last month. It did fantastic. And we're going to do that in Atlanta this October. And we hope you'll join us. With that, we're going to hop over to questions. Great question from Lisa. Will these call-outs in the presentation also be in the report? The green box call-outs will not, Lisa. However, this webinar and the webinar deck will be available next week. We actually can include the webinar deck in the email that goes, I don't know if we can. I'm not going to commit that on behalf of our marketing department, what we can do with the campaign monitor. But regardless, we will make it available to you either through a download or directly. How many people are on each team size, Carla wants to know. Great question, Carla. Sorry we didn't underscore that when we got to that point. When we refer to small, mid-sized, large, and mega teams, small is 1 through 10, mid is 11 to 30, large is 31 to 50, and then mega is 51 and over. All right, let me keep going here. Can we get a creative execs event in Vegas?
Heck yeah.
That sounds wonderful, Craig. Food for thought for us there. You know, Lisa has another great question. Cella doesn't often make it out to the West Coast, and we do. We're in Dallas, as you saw, and we're in Chicago, not typically as far west as we've been, but we do continually reevaluate whether it makes sense for us to get over into San Francisco or another West Coast city. Here's a great question. I'm going to read it out loud for Connor and I to kind of digest. Any indication of whether the work is trending toward message development and projects that would traditionally be outsourced to agencies? So is creative, I'm going to rephrase it in a way and answer it in the way I rephrase it. Are we seeing more of that tier 1 or even sometimes what we call tier 0 at Cella, the strategy and the messaging, is some of that coming in-house? And honestly, Jim, I think there are some elite in-house creative groups who have gotten into that space, but I wouldn't say it is widespread at this point.
And you know what I always find refreshing, Jackie, when Cella or the Boss Group is at meetings with some of our largest in-house customers, is the acknowledgement that there's a space for in-house and a space for ad agencies as well in a well-run in-house group, depending on the work. And I think the best groups in the country really have their agency relationships that are strong, but then they recognize what they can do as an in-house group strong as well.
I'm going to move us to the next question from Mike, because I think it's a really good one. And I don't know if, for this intent and purpose, that we broke the data down this way, but the question is around the 2.5% unemployment rate and how that might break down between folks who might be making $50,000 or less a year and folks maybe who are making $100,000 or more, you know, based on seniority. Is there data available? Probably.
We would really have to dig, and as you can imagine, Mike, digging through the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they did not hire the Boss Group or Cella for their design aesthetics. So that just simply reports not on salary, just if you happen to have a 4-year degree, are you working or not? Now, whether you're happily working, whether you are happy with your compensation, if you're being paid fairly, that's a whole other story. And another data point that comes out that we didn't report on, interestingly, as the unemployment rate has gone down and as talent has become more scarce, wage growth has not kept up. So we are starting to see that break a little bit, where wage growth is starting and raises and compensation is starting to thaw out a little bit. But companies have been very, very tight with wage growth, even though the labor demands have gotten stronger and stronger, or labor shortages, I should say.
Sure. And Mike, you know, I think the question behind the question there for me is one that I witness regularly. are there jobs out there for heads of creative services? How easy is it to move jobs? And I think it's fair to say it's not easy. The more senior you are, the more difficult it becomes, right? And I definitely know a few creative leaders who would like to make a move or in between positions right now and are struggling. It is hard.
So that's compounded too, that if you tend to be industry focused, not that creatives can't certainly move verticals, but if you work in pharma or financial and you really have a career track record of that and you want to stay in that industry, that can be heavily concentrated. Secondly, and this refers back to a slide that we talked about, there's more talent pouring into the in-house groups outside of creative. So 10 years ago, not too long before we launched this report, geez, Jackie, I don't remember meeting any in-house leader that didn't come up through either the marketing or creative channels.
No, it was more like the question we asked folks was, were you a designer or were you a writer?
Right. And now it's not uncommon at all to meet people who perhaps came from operations or procurement, or we saw sales or IT coming over to run the groups and just applying business principles to creative and then having subject matter, a creative director underneath them.
Another question is whether there are any oil and gas companies participating, and there's definitely several oil and gas companies represented here. And when you get the full report in the very back, we show the breakdown across industries, and I can't remember if we pulled out oil and gas or lumped that in energy. I think it must have been lumped in energy. A follow-up question from the same person is, would like to know if the survey sample is mostly from US-based companies or at a global scale. The response, I'm going to give you a rough estimate, but it's something like 80 or 85% are US is their primary location, if not their only location of offices. The second most common headquarters location of respondents was Canada. Scott Humphreys, my friend Scott, had a question. Any data on age of staff, or is that taboo? Yeah, we definitely don't ask that in our survey, and I don't really know of one that looks at that either, but certainly could provide some interesting stories there. We do not provide a list, Tina asked this question, of companies that participate in the survey. We keep it blind. In fact, there's a big thing when you start the survey that says we'll never use your company name or your email address to identify your company name with this data. The only reason we collect your email address is so we could send it to you. And your other information, we use it so we can sort the data by revenue, so we can sort the data by industry, et cetera. So there isn't a comprehensive list available, and I don't think we ever even ask what your company is. We solely ask what your industry, revenue, and your email address is.
Here's a follow-up, Jackie, from someone asking, although we don't currently have a lot of events on the East Coast, does Cella and or Boss have services on the West Coast? And the answer is yes. Both Cella and the Boss Group have active clients coast to coast.
Well, this is a good question from Mike. Regarding having enough versus not having enough talent to fill positions, the question that he would ask is, the hiring managers, do they know what good quality talent looks like?
Mike, I don't know where you are, but any chance you want to grab a beer tonight? And we could probably spend 4 or 5 hours talking about that. That goes back to organizationally, does your company have a profile of what a good culture fit and talent looks like to work at your company? And then do you have any sort of metrics or judging criteria on what a good talent looks like for working in your creative services group? And that's both from a design point of view, from a culture point of view, and do you have any assessments? Or do you work with a third party like the Boss Group who has project-based assessments? So, yes, I feel your pain. There are many times that we have managers that may not necessarily know what's good or not. I mean, heck, 48% of people think that there's abundant digital designers out there that they can hire. So it's an ongoing challenge.
Carla asked, what project management software do people most often use? It's a great question, Carla, and I'll tell you, for the first year, there kind of is more of a leader than there has been in the past, and this is in the report. Typically, we saw a lot of different answers, and we still see a lot of different answers. People, please get out of SharePoint, please get out of Basecamp and move to something a little bit more sophisticated. I know they have their advantages, but there's other things out there. Anyway, I digress. So there used to be, a lot of choices that were around 7, 8, 9% of people were using this. This year we saw, as I mentioned, a bigger degree of difference between the number 1 position and the number 2 position. And the most commonly selected one right now is Workfront. It's a lot of build up to get there.
Good answer.
Wow, this is interesting, Jeremy. While Cella focuses on creative in-house, do you find it a challenge when other shared services may not be run in a professional or as a professional fashion? Wow. Well, yeah, I think there's pros and cons to being in shared services in general when you're not within marketing or communications, which, those types of, in the survey, we show you what division that people report into, right? And about 75% of in-house teams report into departments that we call value-add departments, meaning you're looked at as a value-add when you're in marketing. When you're put into shared services, you're looked in as a service, something supporting the business. And regardless of where you are, you kind of do both, really, is the truth. But do you find it a challenge? I think it can be, that's for sure. But I think I'm fortunate enough to be exposed to so many groups and see that they rise above it, that their service levels and the types of people they employ, it helps them stand out from being relegated to being a service provider.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is, could you provide any input, this is Glenn, into the trends for positioning, naming, branding of in-house creative teams within corporate environments? Oh, that's a great question, Glenn. We did a survey like 2 years back, and I'll share with you the high-level feedback on that survey, what I can recall from it at this point. But I'd love to do it again because I think times have changed. And what we found at that point, the word services wasn't as problematic for folks as it is now, and creative services was the most common name. Creative Center of Excellence, I think Center of Excellence is a big term that's being used in a lot of companies, and some companies have a formal way of getting that designation, and other teams just kind of say, that sounds good, I'll take that too. Any way you get it is probably a good thing, but Creative Center of Excellence I see creeping up a little bit, but it's time to do another survey on that.
And not to sound obvious on this, Jackie, but the larger that your group is, or the larger your company is, please tend towards the go to simplifying it and being very specific about what your group does. We've seen some kind of fancy-pantsy ways to get around, just calling your group in-house creative services or creative services group. And remember, you have a lot of people, again, I'm talking at maybe the mega to the larger teams, that may not be aware of what your group does, that they may not be aware that your group even exists. So you want to be very easy to find and very clear on how they can use you.
Nicholas, what was the most surprising result from this year's report for you personally? Yours is obvious, right?
The 48% of people thinking that there's enough talent to choose from was stunning to me.
Then if I have to pick a different one and a separate one, or if I get to pick a separate one, I should say, I'm looking back at my notes here. I think it's going to be, I think it is going to be the operations managers, how popular they've become. Because 3 years ago, I think that idea was a little bit novel. And the fact that that title is growing, and there's even if you look at all the things in the industry called creative ops nowadays, it wasn't there before I joined Cella. I know that, and it's been 7 years. And it's grown and grown, this popularity of this function of operations, running creative like a business. And that's exciting to me personally.
It is. And, on the positive end, not that there's any negative here, if I could have a second tick as well, is just the hours worked. So the fact that freelance usage is increasing, and I'm not here at all to advocate for freelance versus full-time, that's up to the mix in your department. But the fact that we're at a place that budgets are there and people aren't necessarily working a ton of overtime anymore, that's really big, because there were some periods of time in-house when we couldn't hire external sources, and we were seeing burnout all over the place.
So can you repeat the number of sizes for the creative staff? Yes. And just so you guys know, in the report, it actually will say that within when we reference it. But to repeat it, small was 1 to 10, mid 11 to 30, large 31 to 50, and mega, 51 and above. And the reason why we segment it that way is because typically when you're going to apply best practices or strategies, those groupings tend to have the most ability, with similar ways of approaching things. You know, if I do one thing for a team that's 40 people and try to apply that down to a team with 12, it doesn't work. You have to look at things differently. Here's a great question from Tara. Of the clients that Cella is familiar with, what are the biggest challenges those creative leaders face today? Oh, that was a sigh if you didn't hear that.
Right.
I'll tell you what the survey said, and then I'll decide if I think that it's different. And year over year, it's actually been 5 years running. The top 5 answers have remained the same. They may have jockeyed a little bit for number 1 or number 2 positioning, but they remain the same. And that top one very consistently is affecting clients' behavior. You know, we hear, and it is going to be my same, the survey response versus what I qualitatively know from our clients, it is the same. You get so much feedback around the service that we provide, the way in which we provide it. It takes too long. There's too many rounds. We don't know what happens. And almost, we have our faults. We're all not perfect. We know this. However, a lot of the time, some of these things are just outside of our control. It takes too long because, shake your heads, everybody, you gave them round 2 on Tuesday, and they didn't come back to you until 2 weeks for round 3. Projects don't take long. Sometimes they just go into a black hole that is the hands of our clients. I'm not, you know, sometimes for very good reasons, but then it comes back to us and we have to get it done in 24 hours, unfortunately, sometimes. Sometimes they have too many rounds and it takes long because they don't have their ideas fully baked before they come to us. And there's things we can do to get ahead of that. We can't completely mitigate it, but we can try and impact that. So I think that remains the same. We have time for probably like 2 more questions. Here's a great question from Niffin. I would like to know if there is a defined percentage of cost benefit or just a cost benefit of moving creative in-house. We see a lot of marketers following this trend of moving creative in-house. So yes, there is certainly a cost benefit, and that gets the door open for creatives to be able to, in-house teams to take on more work. And I'm going to come back to that cost benefit. But you should find there's lots of other benefits as well that are more difficult to quantify. Speed, ability to collaborate, having skin in the game, that's their brand, that's their company, they really want it to do well. Those things are all very important. The cost benefit, we have a great blog and set of blog posts that you can refer to on this one, Nathan. But if you go to our site in the blog window, you can look it up and I'll actually have your information and follow up with you. But it's called, you know, cost avoidance or cost savings more accurately. And you can calculate that if you understand what your group's chargeback rate is, and regardless of whether you're a chargeback team or not, you can calculate this. We have a calculator on our website you can use. Know what your hourly cost would be. And I would advise knowing what your all-in cost would be. And then you can compare that to the rates of external agencies. And often your procurement departments or your marketing clients may not know what their hourly rates are. They may work under different structures. But a way to kind of learn a market rate, if that information isn't available to you internally, is to look at the 4A's labor billing rate survey. Again, this is referenced in that same blog post on our article on our website. And you can find out that the average blended creative services rate is X within an agency, and typically it falls between 150 and 180 depending on geography, and it is cut by geography, which is really helpful. And compare that to your own rate, which we've seen what that could be in previous slides, and looking at that delta. Okay, we're just looking for the next question. Sorry, we're skipping some that we think are more difficult or there isn't an easy answer for.
Or redundant.
Or redundant, that's true too. Do you have any data on the effectiveness of remote or work from home creatives as a business model?
That's a really good question.
I don't have data. I have a qualitative story we can share.
Okay.
So one of our managed in-house agencies works for an organization that has I'm going to use the corporate speak, has been trying to decrease their footprint, meaning they have less and less office space for the creatives to sit at. So this actually has forced a partial remote rotating work from home across our employee base of more than 100 people there. We pay our folks fairly. The benefits are fair. They're not best in class like that Fortune 100 company might be, but they're fair, right? We have a really great professional development program. Where we are stellar is in this work from home and schedule flexibility.
Yeah.
Our retention is very high, and conversely, of course, our attrition is very low. And so when you think about the effectiveness of it from a retention point of view, it is very high for us. We believe that is one of the top reasons folks choose to work with us and continue to work with us.
Yeah, and depending on what the pain point could be for you, attrition may be the place to start. Is if you're having higher attrition and the attrition data is right in the survey that you could use, and talk about the relevance or prevalence, I should say, of off-site working, that our groups in this report that have such flexibility are able to keep their retention rate relatively high as compared to groups that don't. So that's I'd say the most common metric that we see. Obviously, there's the physical space metric, Jackie. That's a really hard number. But then we typically see go to attrition. Are we having trouble retaining or attracting talent for these roles?
We'll answer just one last one from Charlene because it's an easy question for you, Connor. And then we're right here at 2 o'clock. Does the Boss Group represent clients in Boston who are not able to relocate?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Told you it was easy.
Yeah, we work nationally. We do not currently have a brick and mortar space within Boston, but we have verticals that work with candidates and clients all throughout the country, and hope to be in Beantown physically in the not too distant future.
So we'd like to thank you guys once again for joining us this year. We'll follow up in an email by end of business today with a link to where you can download the report. It'll also have a link to the webinar deck for you as well. In addition, there were a few resources that folks have asked for when those are available or where those are available. We will include it in the follow-up email so that you'll have those, something around the cost avoidance calculation. Another person asked around the tiers. So we'll share those resources with you and point you to them directly. Thank you again.
Thank you again. And if you're in one of our markets, we'd love to see you with Creative Execs over the next couple of weeks.
Have a great day, everybody. Thanks.